Joining us now with more on the legal landscape for big tech. He's probably laughing. Former Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Kanter. He is a distinguished law professor for the Washington University in St. Louis. Great school, great town, and a CNBC contributor. Welcome again, Jonathan. We usually see you on set.
It's great to be here. I'm here in beautiful Stowe, Vermont today.
Lovely.
What do you think of this? Number one, is there any possibility that Perplexity could succeed here?
Yeah, there's a possibility. So the Department of Justice, as you mentioned, has requested the court require Google to divest Chrome. This is a clever move by Perplexity, because one of the things that Google is arguing in court is that, one, Chrome has no value outside of Google, and two, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to divest the asset. Now, here you have Perplexity with 34 billion reasons why it has value outside of Google, and if they're willing to buy for $34 billion, then clearly it's an asset that they can achieve, or an acquisition that they could complete. The other piece that also is important here is browsers are going to be the front lines for the AI wars, and I think that's becoming clear. And right now, Google and Apple own most of the distribution points. And the focus of the antitrust case was locking up distribution points. And so the same day you have Perplexity bidding to buy Google's browser, you have Elon Musk talking about Apple locking up distribution points for OpenAI. So I think what we're seeing here is the next stage of the platform wars, where Google and Apple are competing, or at least seen as bullies to some degree by the rest of the industry who want access to distribution.
Did you understand? We went back and forth yesterday with exactly what Elon Musk was accusing Apple of doing. Is he got a point, or is Apple? I mean, Apple's allowed to control how they rank. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a clunky email. I mean, it's always hard to get in the mind of Elon Musk. I think what I read between the lines is that he's saying that Apple, because it owns the distribution points, is cutting a deal with OpenAI to distribute OpenAI, exclude others, and maybe there's some funkiness going on in the App Store as a result. But I think it's really just a relative of the case that the DOJ won under our watch against Google, which was locking up distribution points on Apple, Chrome, Android, and these other platforms that are really critical to these technologies, whether it's search or an entry point for AI.
Well, let me ask you a different question, Jonathan, which is, you were fighting, I hate to say yesterday's war, but we are now moving into a place where we're talking about OpenAI constantly, Anthropic, Perplexity, et cetera, Gemini. It seems to me that you're right. The entry point in is still a huge value proposition. But all of the other component parts that you went after historically, the advertising side of it, how they interacted with different platforms and things, doesn't that seem to be something that, if we're talking about the world of technology a couple of years from now, is going to look very different?
Well, it depends how what happens. I mean, when we asked for divestiture of the Chrome browser, people said we were fighting yesterday's war and that browsers were no longer relevant. And now we have Perplexity bidding $34 billion because browsers are the front lines of the AI wars. I think what we see here is, do we want next generation of technologies to thrive and compete, or are we going to have the previous generation of technologies going more slowly and locking up markets? And I think that's really what this is about. But let's be clear. I mean, advertising, online advertising is still a massive business. It's still most of Google's profits. iOS is still a massive business. It's most of Apple's profits and valuation. So these businesses are huge and really important, not just for today's technologies, but for tomorrow's technologies as well.
What did you think when you saw this, just on a completely different subject? What do you think of 15% of the revenues of NVIDIA and AMD going to the U.S. government? I mean, it'd be nice it's always nice to bring in some money with the deficits we're running. Is this the way to do it?
No, it's not. I mean, we're not China, right? When you start blurring the lines between the state and the state's enterprises or the free market, we start to look a lot more like China. And so whether it's taking 15% of of everyone's profits. I mean, that's just a tax, basically. But it's also nationalizing the business. Similar, I think there was like a report that Anthropic was going to offer to give Claude to the government for $1. Again, it starts to blur those lines and frankly raise lots of national security and other kinds of questions as well.
Yeah. I got one for you.
Well, I won't do the whataboutism. I always get yelled at for that.
No, I'm going to go totally political. I want to go totally political with Jonathan.
Yep.
You ready? Because here we are. Here we are making the argument that this president has gone into this sort of socialistic,
you're gonna be me on this?
Marxist world. I get it, and people have made that argument. So my question is, and you've just said that I don't think you like that. What do you think of Mamdani?
I'd like you to create an app for me that is less political. Andrew, listen, I think Mamdani is talking about issues that people care about, which is cost of living. And so setting aside whether you're for him or against him, I'm not a politician. All I'm just saying, no, my God, I mean, the fact of the matter is he's succeeding because he's talking about issues that people care about.
Whether Jonathan, on that score, you're right. That's why I agree that's why he's succeeding.
But that's a total cop-out. That's a total cop-out, and that's exactly what Elizabeth Warren said. And you really ought to be able to be more. You're a capitalist, Jonathan. I hope.
I am an arty. Listen,
well,
Joe.
So that's
let
why.
me be very clear.
Jonathan,
I am
the reason I asked you the question is not whether Mamdani is I agree with you. He is turning out to be, thus far at least, a good politician. The question is whether you believe in some of the things that he is articulating as part of his policy positions. Namely, the idea of socialism, namely the idea of freezing rent, giving out products and other things like food for free, things like that. So do you, as somebody who's talked about capitalism and such, look at somebody like him versus maybe somebody like Cuomo, and Cuomo has his own problems. Let's be very clear about that. How do you look at that? I know you're not living in New York right now, but nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm also not a politician, but I'm a capitalist. And so I don't agree with everything he says and everything he stands for. But I think he's talking about issues that resonate. And I think to the extent that any politician, whether it's Donald Trump, who has done this effectively as well, or Mamdani, to the extent they're talking about issues that affect people's cost of living, they're more likely to get traction. And that's really what's happening here. And how you solve these problems is a good debate that we should be having. But I think a lot of the typical cop-out from Democrats in the past was to try to find safe issues without really talking about the economy. And I think we have to do that now.
Yeah, I guess the point I was making about the state-sponsored capitalism in the CHIPS Act, when you mandate child care coverage, union wages, ESG, DEI, both sides do it, and it's whataboutism, but there's whataboutism and there's hypocrisy, and that was a mess. A lot of the stuff that was in the Biden administration's
but that's
legislation too. I'd almost rather get the 15% from NVIDIA than do all this feel-good stuff that it just ends up hurting the people that
so you're in favor, Joe, it sounds like you're in favor of a 15% chip tax.
15% tip tax. You mean
tax.
We shouldn't have gotten rid of the tax on tips? I mean, I'm not.
No, chip tax.
Oh,
chip tax.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, a lot of finger pointing from people about, state-sponsored or industrial policy, and the masters of that was the Biden administration, and now suddenly, everybody's found religion.
Yeah, well, listen, I think we can get into the whataboutism, but I will say there's a little bit of a difference when the government is giving incentives for somebody to do something versus simply saying, if you're going to do business with somebody else, I need my taste. And there's a difference there, I think, fairly.